Hey, what's going on?
Hello.
Hello, Epic.
What's up, Epic? My wife is out there. I see her. Hello. Hello, wife. Hello, Jody. I see you there too.
And maybe the Babcock clan.
Who else? Who knows? Who else could be there? It's a mystery.
Right.
It's a mystery. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. It is Thursday night. Woot woot.
Throwback.
Can't you tell I'm excited?
Almost
What
the
is
weekend.
going on? It is almost there. What's up, Chad? I see you there. Howdy to you as
And
well.
it's supposed to be nice, like somewhat spring-like.
Yeah, it was pretty warm today. I got a flat tire today, so that happened.
Oh,
Yeah, it was.
How'd that
I've had a tire that's kind of like it's been a little iffy, and then I was going down. I actually blew it up today just to make sure it was nice and firm, and then I went down my road and just popped. So, what's up, Roscoe and Lori? I see you there. Thanks for joining us tonight. Thursday night throwback. That's what we call this. It is Thursday night. It's almost the weekend. It's practically the weekend. I mean, we just started a day early, so it's all good. It's all good. Get you ready for your weekend. Man, my name is Dwayne. I am the lead pastor at Epic Community Church. Joining me this way is Pastor Melanie. And then over here, everything is backwards on the screen. It's weird. Down there is Pastor Steve. They're joining me too. So what's up? And then you're joining me, Chad and Jody and Roscoe and Lori and Sadie and whoever else is out there that we haven't heard from yet. But if you're in the chat, would like to hear from you because I got a question for you, actually. If you've been joining us in this series, we are in our Rhythms of a Disciple series. We've been talking about the rhythms of a disciple. What makes a disciple a disciple? What kind of habits and rhythms do they incorporate in their lives? And so let me bring up this graphic. We've been kind of talking through, just the different rhythms of a disciple, what they are and what they look like. And here they are. When we put them all together, if you just kind of jumble them up a little bit, you get this acrostic: my, epic, multiply, yield, engage, practice, identify, and commit. That helps us to remember what they are. The church has, we would say, three main rhythms of worship, community, and mission. And so when we look at these rhythms, my question for you, chat, as you're joining us, is which of these rhythms throughout this series have you incorporated into your life to grow as a disciple since the series has started? So since the series has started, what new rhythms have you incorporated into your life to grow as a disciple? We'd love to hear from you in the chat. We want to celebrate with you and just hear how your journey is going. So please share something in chat. Would love that. So getting back to our rhythms, we've been talking through the rhythms. In this past week on Sunday, Nick brought a message about multiply, which is our last rhythm as we kind of bring this series to a close. And we've been talking a lot about, just disciples, multiplying disciples. At Epic, we love planting churches, and so multiplication is just a part of our DNA. And we talk a little bit about the mission of the church, right, which is the Great Commission that Jesus gave, and we talk about it quite frequently at Epic. You can find it in Matthew. I'm going to read it for you here. Matthew chapter 28. And it's in verses 18 through 20. And here's what it says. It says, "Then Jesus came to them and said, 'All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age.'" That is the great commission that Jesus left us with, his church. And, Jesus clearly in this passage, and we'll see in just a second how much clearer he is, but is giving us a mandate as the church to multiply. But this is nothing new. Like Jesus's words are nothing new to the people of God. We've always had a mandate to multiply. In fact, if we go all the way back to the beginning, when God created Adam and Eve, it tells us in Genesis chapter 1, it says, "So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them." And then it says in verse 28, "Then God blessed them and said, 'Be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth and to govern it.'" And so we see, like, one of the purposes for mankind is that God wanted us to take his image and to fill the earth with it, right? So that the earth would be full of his image. But we know just a couple chapters right after this that mankind enters into sin, that they are disobedient to God and what he wants. And this opens up all kinds of problems for humanity and for the world and for creation. Just tons of problems now into the world. God, he looks at the earth and he's like, what did I do? I'm not sure that this was the greatest idea. He decides to send a flood, right? We find this in Genesis chapter 9. He sends a flood on the earth, but he decides to save Noah and Noah's family. And so if you know that story, Noah builds an ark, a gigantic ark, where him and his family are saved. And at the end of this 40 days and 40 nights, and then the water recedes, Noah and his family get off the boat. And immediately after they get off the boat, God kind of reiterates his purpose, right, for humanity. He says this in Genesis chapter 9, verse 1. He says, then God blessed Noah and his sons, and he told them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. Essentially the same command that he gave Adam and Eve, he's now reiterating to Noah. The purpose of humanity is tied into this idea that we are made in the image of God and that we are his ambassadors to the earth, to all of creation, that God's intention is to fill the earth with his image. And so that's what we continue to do under the commissioning of Jesus, right? And the commission that he gave the church is to multiply, to go out and to make disciples, to fill the world with this image of God. So this same old when it comes to the mission of God. But this might interest you that, we often sometimes think that the mission of the church is carried out by its pastors. But we can clearly see here that Jesus gives his commissioning to his disciples to carry out the mission, to go and to make disciples. So he's actually telling disciples to go and make disciples. And then he kind of sets us up. Paul goes into this whole thing about a pastor's role and talks about really it's the pastor's job then to equip disciples to make disciples. That is really the role of a pastor. Now we've twisted that in all different kinds of ways, throughout the years. But essentially it is the mandate of the church, not just its pastors, to make disciples, to multiply. And that's what we're talking about tonight. Now, joining me, we have Pastor Melanie, we have Pastor Steve, who have both multiplied in their own ways, right? Melanie recently just finished up with a discipleship group and sounds like maybe starting another discipleship group, right? Making disciples. Pastor Steve has planted a church, is also now involved in a discipleship group. And so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions tonight just about multiplication. We want to hear from both of you, just kind of at the multiplying church level, Steve, and at the multiplying disciple level, Melanie. We just want to hear from you how multiplication goes, some of the things that we can expect as we're doing it. And I'd love to hear from you, Chad. If you're involved in a discipleship group, I want to hear how that's going. I want to hear your stories tonight, and I want you to share that. In fact, before we get into our questions, let's check with chat. Let's see. He said more intentional practice since January 1st. So she's been just more intentional with practicing. A lot of that has to do with spiritual disciplines, right? Chad, I forget I can throw that up on the screen. So more intentional practice since January 1st. And then Chad shared this. He said, I've combined my 2D groups to do a YouVersion study on how to pray with our wives. Does that fall under practice? I think so.
Absolutely.
I think that definitely, I would call that practice for sure. I mean, you could probably call that a lot of things. Commitment, you could talk about committing there. And so you're probably growing in that area too, I would imagine. And then, Sadie already answered that question. Practice and multiply, she said. So very good. Yeah, true that. Here, Roscoe shared this. He said, we've committed to morning prayer, daily Bible study, supper time prayer for couples, and then bedtime prayer. Man, that's amazing.
That's cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. So really hitting on that practice, I think, rhythm of a disciple, so important. I have to imagine you're just more tuned in to what God wants from you with just doing that much prayer, and hopefully more tuned into each other too, just praying with each other in that way. So that's amazing. I appreciate you sharing that, Roscoe. Thanks for that. So keep it coming, chat. By the way, if you're just joining us, we're talking about the rhythm of a disciple called Multiply, which is the last one in our series that we're talking about. It's all about disciples making disciples, and at Epic, we're about disciple multiplication. We're also about churches planting churches and discipling themselves. And so multiplication is just a value of ours, but we also see how this is the rhythm of a disciple. It is the mandate of a disciple to make disciples. And so we're talking about multiplying, and really just want to hear from you. If you've been, I'll throw this graphic up just again for you in case you're just joining us, but which one of these rhythms would you say that you've been growing in as a disciple since we started this series? Identifying as a child of God, practicing spiritual disciplines, yielding to God's wisdom, lifestyle, salvation, committing to one another, engaging with believers and non-believers, and then multiplying disciples. Which one of those are you getting better at? Let me ask you, Melanie and Steve, I'll just kind of ask each question. And I think if you can just kind of answer the question as it relates to your experience, Melanie, with discipleship groups and just how you've been multiplying disciples. And then Steve, from your perspective, you can answer from that perspective as well if you want to, but then I'd love to hear just from your perspective of planting churches, what that looks like. So before we kind of get into the questions, why don't you give me a little background? Melanie, talk a little bit about just your discipleship group experience. When did you start one? How long was it? So forth and so on. And then Steve will go to you.
Yeah. A discipleship group I started would have been towards the end of 2019. So we started meeting in person. I invited 3 women that it's just a matter of praying like, God, who do you want me to ask? It's always a challenge because everybody's so busy. So you worry about who you're asking and if they have enough time and if you're even going to find, somebody that's willing to commit that time. The upfront commitment really was say, hey, would you journey with me for 6 months and meet weekly? And we were going to go just through this amazing book that just talks about some really core principles of Christianity and being a disciple. And we ended up wrapping up early summer. Obviously, COVID interrupted some things, but we started meeting online via Zoom. We were committed to it, so we kept moving. It was awkward at first, but we kept on going, and we finished up, and it was a pretty awesome experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great summary. Thanks for that. Steve, talk a little bit about just your experience with Pathway. How did all that come about? And, just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I actually got connected with the founder of Epic, Ed Love, back in 2007. And in 2008, we ventured towards the journey of moving to St. John's. That Epic was sponsoring us and sending us off as our mother church to plant in St. John's called Pathway Church. And, we were there for about five years at the church. And it's interesting how you still stay connected to the mothership, because we're still here. So,
yeah. And you've been multiple places since then and still have stayed connected to Epic, which is, again, I think just speaks to that power of multiplication. And, similarly in discipleship, right, as we connect to disciples, tend to be relationships that last much longer than even the 6-month study, right, Melanie? You just continue. Yeah, you continue to connect, you continue to check in, and you just build relationship there. And that, and if you're like me, you have those relationships built. It's really hard to break away from those relationships. You long for good, intimate, honest, just relationships. And so that's good. So let me ask you this: what motivated you to move into this take this multiplication journey? What motivated you to be a multiplier?
You want me to start off?
Yeah, go ahead, Melanie. Why don't you start us off there?
Well, first of all, Jesus tells us to. So, I'm trying to be obedient, that kind of thing. Jesus says to do that. But secondly, it's because I feel like people don't realize the potential that they have and how God can use them. And so I was just, I get excited to just offer people that opportunity to pour into them and then challenge them. And so I just got excited about that. It's amazing how, if somebody hadn't challenged me and invested in me, I would never be where I was today. And so I just want to be able to do that for other people.
Yeah, that's great. And what a great opportunity to do that. How about you, Steve? What motivated you to be a multiplier?
Yeah, I'll speak on the church plant front of things, is that there started to really even become more so of an ache inside of my own personal heart of seeing people who are so far from God in the church. And that gap was continually increasing and getting larger and larger. And as I saw that, there was really something inside of me that said that there was something missing. Because, I grew up in a traditional church, which, traditional church is not a bad thing, but I felt like that there was something that was missing. And the last church that we were associated with really did have a passion for making disciples, but they wanted to do it with the people that were already in the church. And they weren't looking outside of that. And for me, I'm like, I really want to reach people who are far from Christ and bring them along the journey towards discipleship. It was really my heart. And that kind of pushed us in that direction.
Yeah, and back then, and it's still true today, church planting is the best way to reach people, especially in a new community, but just reaching people in general for Christ. Church planting is extremely powerful for that, and that's why Epic is involved in church planting. At some point, something else may work better than church planting when it comes to reaching people, especially across communities. As we move into digital space, you often wonder if there isn't going to be a better way at some point in time. But for now, church planting is it. That's why we invest, a lot of our resources, a lot of our time and focus and energy on church planting. Hello, Deb. I see you there. Welcome
There's
tonight.
Some good answers coming through.
Yeah. Let's jump over here. Let's see what we got here. We got Kathy shared this. I think I'm getting better at practice. Before anything else in the morning, I do my Christian meditation, morning devotional, and just listening and journaling. Last thing I do at night is pray over my family and any other prayer requests that have, and of course, that's all I can show up, but it says that have come up during the day. Yeah, that's amazing. So I would definitely say you're getting better at practice then. I don't know what your life was like before, but certainly you are implementing that rhythm of practice. So that's wonderful, Kathy. Thanks for sharing that. Chad shared a little bit about his multiplication journey and why he's a multiplier. Chad also has led a D group, which then multiplied, and he's leading another one now. And Chad says obedience and not being complacent. So those were the things that kind of motivated him to be a multiplier. Thanks for sharing that, Chad. Sadie also has led a D group. She said this: motivated to multiply to keep the mission of the church thriving and growing. So many churches closing and people who don't know Jesus yet. We need to be so intentional about multiplication. That is true. And I think the trajectory that we were on before COVID was already that we were seeing many, many churches closing and just fewer and fewer people coming to know Christ. And once the pandemic happened, I feel like that just accelerated everything, tremendously. In fact, I read a stat today. I'll be sharing it on Sunday as we talk about our new series. But the stat was essentially that 20%, many people have not yet come back to in-person church, but still engage with the church somehow, usually digitally. But the stat that Barna put out today was that 20% of the church has not returned in any way, shape, or form and no longer engages with the church. That's a huge number,
Wow.
As you can imagine. And pretty heartbreaking at that, because it's, the numbers of unchurched people are already heartbreaking, people who don't know Christ. And then you have people who do, and you've just lost 20%. I mean, that's pretty amazing. But that's what we see the pandemic doing. It is essentially accelerating what's happening in culture, right? And so we see that it is heartbreaking, and definitely a reason that the church has to stay multiplying. In fact, I know just from the research that we've done in church planting, that the Wesleyan Church, who is the tribe that we're kind of a part of, we have to stay at a 3% multiplication rate of our churches. So we have to, however many churches that we have total, let's say we have 100, we have to plant 3 churches every year to kind of break even, if you will, because that's how many close, is about 3%. To make any kind of headway, with multiplication, we have to be at about 7%. If we want to see growth and we want to see a movement happen. We need, out of 100 churches, we need 7 of those churches planting other churches. And the more that we can see that happen, the more that a movement can happen, and the more that we can begin to actually grow in numbers instead of just kind of stopping the bleeding. which seems like it's happening now. And so that's why Epic, again, just another reason that Epic is so involved in church planting. What's up, Kim? Good evening to you as well. Little late, but better late than never. So good to see you. Thanks for joining us. And if you are just joining us, by the way, we're talking about the last rhythm in our rhythm series, which is the rhythm of multiplication. And so we're really talking about disciples making disciples. It's a missional mandate for us as the church. It's what Christ calls us to do, to make disciples, to baptize them, and to teach them the ways of Jesus. And so that's what we're talking about tonight, is multiplication. And I've been asking Melanie, who has led discipleship groups, several in the past, but even in a more structured form recently, and then Steve, who has planted churches. I'm just kind of asking their experience with multiplication, and they're sharing some of their journey. So tell me this, guys, what are some of the tensions that you feel about multiplication? You know, when you first were kind of thinking about multiplying, maybe it was you were toying with the idea. What were some of the tensions that came that you had to wrestle through, do you think, before actually doing multiplication in some shape or form? Steve, why don't you go first on this one?
Yeah, man, there's so many that you can name, but I think that across the board, whether it's a church planter, leading a discipleship group, whatever it is, the biggest tension is I feel so inadequate. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what this is supposed to look like, and I am scared out of my gourd. You know, and so there's this inadequacy of I really don't know what I'm doing, but the obedience has to be more powerful than your inadequacy.
Yeah, so true. That's a great one. As we began to start our discipleship groups at Epic, we knew it would be a huge ask for people, and sure, some of that is time and commitment. It's just a big, it's just a time commitment. It's a huge commitment to that process. But I think we knew going in that many people would feel inadequate or unqualified, to do something of that sort. And so, it helps the more I think that we can speak into others to say, you are ready, right? Yeah. And that can happen through discipleship groups. In fact, that's part of our process within discipleship groups, to point out each other's gifts and to really, build up other disciples to make disciples. So I appreciate that. Melanie, what about you? What are some of the tensions that you felt just kind of going into multiplication?
Just the big ask of creating that discipleship group. The fear that I wouldn't get anyone to commit to that. They're just going to say no. And you're like, okay, and just knowing how busy women are. When you want to assemble a group of women, we have a lot of logistics to prioritize. And so I'm great at saying everybody's busy and not giving them the opportunity to make their own decisions. So I had to go outside of my comfort zone of asking some women that I felt God was telling me to ask, even though they were busy, and allowing them to make that decision. And lo and behold, they made that decision that discipleship group was a priority. So it was the big ask. It was hard to hopefully you get that group of women.
Yeah. I mean, there's always that fear of rejection, I think, right? That's just possible. And that maybe that's people not committing to the time or the energy to do it. But sometimes it feels like they're not committing to you. And that can be hurtful too, especially if it's somebody close to you, somebody that you have a relationship with, somebody that you really know that this would be a good thing for. Sometimes they say no. And you got to be okay with that, right? It's just a part of being obedient to what Christ is calling us to. Chad said this. He said, I felt unworthy and unqualified, but that was a lie. Right. And sometimes it's like you got to remind yourself of that. Like these are lies. This is what the enemy would have you believe, so as to not get involved in the work that Christ wants you to get involved in, right? And
or even create excuses to be able to say, I just need to get a little more educated before I actually do this.
Sure, we do. Absolutely. Talk ourselves out of it or into something else. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's face it. It's easier not to multiply.
Oh, absolutely.
We don't have to face the rejection. We don't have to face the fear of failure. And there's a good chance when you start a discipleship group that, you know, maybe people show up for the first one or the second one, but what about the third one? You know, what about 3 months in? What about 4 months in? You know, are people still showing up? So there's that too. You're committing your time and energy, and then are other people gonna make that same commitment to you? There's fear definitely involved in there. Let's see what Tracy says here. Tracy said, I think those statistics show just how important our habits are. People whose habits were shaken by the pandemic have probably formed other habits, which may be now hard to break. That is actually one of the biggest reasons, right, that people have not returned to church. And, you know, they've been saying for a while in the church world that once people get that hour and a half, 2 hours, however long it is that they're at church, once you get that back, and you begin new rhythms in that time frame, it's really hard to then, you know, let those other rhythms go and begin to go back to the church rhythm that you had before. And so that's so true. I mean, just so true what you said there, Tracy. Sadie said she had lots of no's for her first D group. So she asked quite a few people before she finally had some people who said yes. And then her group, of course, turned out to be amazing. The people that she did have. And, you know, that's often God's way, right? That what is happening? Why are all these people saying, no, I'm trying to be obedient. Why aren't you being faithful here, Lord? You know, throw me a bone. Let's go before me into the hearts of those who I'm going to ask, please, and have them change their mind. And yet, you know, God just worked everything out there for her group. I'll speak for her because I know that her group was amazing. So, but she did add this. She said, here we go. I stayed obedient and had the best group. Oh, so she did say it. See, that was her testimony. It wasn't just me saying it. And yeah, it's so true. It turned out amazing. All right. So you guys talked a little bit about some of the tensions. Were there any challenges that you faced after you got over the tensions and you began your group or began your church? What were some of the challenges that you had to face then as the group and as the church were up and running? And I realize this could be a really long list, so maybe keep it to a couple of things.
You know, I would say there's the before and then there's the after. You know, when we were church planting, we're what we call a parachute drop in the community. That you don't know anybody, you don't know anything about the community, and you're dropped in there, and you have to learn the community as quickly as possible because you're trying to plant a church within about a year time span. So that was pretty difficult. So a lot of the things that we came in thinking of what the church was going to be like, we really had to shift so many different times to try to meet the needs of the community. So that was a big challenge. And the other personal big challenge for me is this: prepare for the long haul of discipleship. Because I think we put such a short time span on discipleship that it's not. It's really the long haul of, because you have to develop relationships, you have to get to know people. In America, that is so long to do. So we actually coined a phrase when we were at Pathway is you have to spend a long time on the front porch before someone will let you in. And so that's just what we did. We just spent a long time just spending with people before they could really trust us.
Well, and I think especially up here in the north, it's even that's even true, you know, to the nth degree. My buddy Corey, who you both know, Corey Atkins, who's pastor down in Huntington, West Virginia, he talks about that all the time when he comes to the north. It's just how different the culture is, you know, compared to the south. That, you know, somebody knocks on his door at home, they get invited in, they, you know, he'll make them dinner and, you know, make them up a bed before he returns them home. And up here, you know, if you can get somebody to open the door, you know, wide enough that the chain hits, you know, you're doing just a little bit better. And so he makes fun of us all the time and talks about that, but it's so true. You know, what you said, just building those relationships just takes time. We often talk about how it's a game of chess, not checkers, right? We talk about that a lot. What about you, Melanie? What challenges, you know, did you face in your D group?
I guess time would have been a thing. We, you know, a couple of our group, they had kids in sports and things. So we had to kind of, every week it was like, okay, what does next week look like? Can we still meet on Wednesday night, that kind of thing. So that was challenging, but we pushed through. I mean, I don't think we might have missed 1 or 2 weeks in our 6 months, and we had the holidays in there too, but that was a challenge but we pushed through, I feel like, and we made, it was just a priority. We made a commitment to it. And so every week we'd just adjust. Okay, you can't meet on Wednesday. What night can you meet? So that was a challenge. And then obviously facing not being able to meet in person for a while at the end, it was like we had built these, you kind of got into a rhythm of what our group would look like and how we related. And then we had to go online. And that was a little bit, I was like, you thought, oh, maybe we just need to stop, but we didn't.
Yeah.
So,
well, good thing. I'm glad that you didn't.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a challenge to overcome, I think, with any group that we've done. By the way, I'm going to post a next step link here. This link that I just posted in the chat. If you're interested in a D group, and you haven't been in one yet, I'd just love for you to go out, click on that link. That's going to give you an option, just to let us know that you want to join a group. Every once in a while, we will have, groups that are ready to start that don't have, that next person that they need to start. Sometimes we'll have 2 or 3 together who will just let us know that they're ready to start a group, but there's not necessarily someone who's ready to lead, and they just want to be a part of that. Like, we can help with that. And so if you're interested in joining up with a discipleship group with 2 or 3 other people, I'd just love it if you follow that link. Just let us know that you're interested, and maybe we can make something happen there. We want to do that for you. Chad said this, just gaining trust within the relationships in the group context. That also can take some time. Sometimes it never happens. Sometimes it just takes time to get there. But that once that affinity is rolling and that trust begins to build in the group, you can really start to see some vulnerability within the group. The group gets really personal with one another. When that begins to happen, that's when the most growth seems to happen. That's when you can really speak into each other's lives and get to know each other. And so, stick it out. If you're in a group like that, just stick it out. See if those relationships will build trust. It takes time. It really does. Sadie said this. She said, my D group and the prep for each week held me so close to Jesus during the beginning of the pandemic. I'm so thankful for that practice and commitment in place pre-COVID. Yeah. So just going into COVID, she already had those rhythms. And I tell people all the time, especially when it comes to the rhythms of a disciple, like what we've been talking about, like, it's, even though we have a practice rhythm, I don't want to confuse the two, but like all of these rhythms are practice for life. Like, we do them now, we start them now, so that when crisis hits in our life, whether it's COVID or, whatever it might be in our life, we start those practices so that those are in place. And if those are in place in our life when crisis hits, man, it just makes life easier, because we already have a rhythm of trusting in the Lord. We already have a rhythm of where our identity comes from. There's just some things there that just build a foundation on a solid rock instead of, sandy ground, as Scripture tells us. And so important to begin to build those rhythms in life before you need them, right? Not when you need them, because that's the hardest time to build that foundation. You really want it built before you actually need it. So what were some celebrations then that you could point to, either in your group or or at Pathway, just overall? What were you celebrating, without using anybody's name, by the way? Especially for our D groups, but was there anything that you can point to that you were celebrating, even if it was just something in your own life? Go ahead, Mel. Why don't you start us?
I can go. Yep, that's fine. Basically, I mean, you have a mission to multiply and to to become a better disciple, and you end up gaining new friendships. I celebrate that I have 3 women that maybe I knew of before, but now I know, and I have more prayer warriors in my life. And I was just challenged, in my faith, and just having those conversations with people that you can trust and that are going to speak truth into your life is awesome. And then, I mean, honestly, 2 of the women that were in my group have already multiplied and began their own group, and one is praying about leading a ministry. So it's exciting to see how that multiplication happening.
Yeah, it's amazing. And a lot of that can come out, when we lead those D groups, we want to multiply those groups somehow, some way. And sometimes that looks like others leading other people in a D group. Sometimes it looks like them going off and leading ministry. So much to celebrate there. Either way, multiplication is happening. And that's what we love to celebrate at Epic, is when multiplication happens within those groups or otherwise. Steve, what about you?
Oh man, it is hard to really pinpoint even one or two, but I will do my best.
Yeah.
It was overall, it was really cool to be able to see people who were challenged to take their next step, and then when they actually did it, they come back and be like, "I can't believe I just did that." And there's this new passion for being able to come alongside other people, to be able to help them become disciples because they've actually learned and practiced it themselves.
Yeah.
So we saw a lot of that, but we also saw a lot of people. As you know, that whenever you start a new church in a community, you're known as the cult of the community.
No.
Epic was known for that for a while. I'm not sure about it anymore, but yeah.
Yeah. And it was cool in a sense because other people were saying, well, that church known as Pathway will take anybody, which we will. We will accept anybody and embrace anybody. And it was cool to see one individual specifically who came in just with no hope, was into prescription drugs, just trying to dull the pain, and the people that just came around her and just loved her so immensely that she accepted Christ, and we were able to baptize her in the church.
Yeah.
It was just cool to see those transformation relationships or stories.
Yeah, definitely. And that's again something that just turns our crank at Epic, right? It's just transformation and hearing those stories. That's why we love it when you share in chat, just how you've been growing in your rhythms of a disciple and seeing those things play out in your life. It's just so exciting for us, and it's something that we celebrate. We just love it when we multiply. I'll just share this. Chad said, here's something that he was celebrating: intimate relationships. He has 6 men he can lean on and grow with. And it's interesting, when you think about Jesus and just the type of person that he was, the charisma that he had, also just the power, authority. I mean, you name it, Jesus had it. And yet he was really close to 3 of his disciples, and then had this group of kind of 12. And, he'd taught to the crowds, but was really made those his relationships. And it's interesting to me, growing up in the city and then moving to a small town, I feel like I had hardly any relationships before moving here. Before really getting involved in the church, it just didn't seem like a priority to me. And so when Chad says, man, I got 6 men that I can lean on and grow with now, I'm like, that's what a difference maker.
Yeah.
And, we were talking, I think, it was in staff meeting this week, I think, guys, we were talking about Alan Hirsch, and he said, he had a quote where he said, you can do more with 12 disciples than you can do with 1,200 consumers, right? That's how he put it. That when you have people who are truly committed, who have these rhythms built into their life and just have a passion for Christ, you can do more with that than 1,200 people who just don't have that same drive and rhythms. And so, I totally get that, Chad. That's amazing. Well, hey, we're running over on time. And so I want to wrap up, but that, thanks for sharing your stories, Melanie and Steve, and chat. Thank you so much for just engaging with us tonight. I love this time together where we can do that. And so thanks for joining us here on Thursday Night Throwback. You can join us next Thursday night for Thursday Night Throwback. We'll be meeting again at 7:00 EST. And we're starting a new series this week, this Sunday, and it's called Contagious. And we're going to be talking about living a life of influence in a digital world. And I'm really looking forward to that series. We're going to start out by, we're going to do I'm going to share some of the research that I've been doing just on digital and the difference that it's been making, how we're shifting as a culture into just being a culture that's really relying on digital content. And then we're going to go into talking about how Jesus tells us to be, or he actually doesn't tell us to be, he tells us that we are the salt of the earth. And I'm reading this book. I'll share this with you because I'm going to give this away on Sunday. So I'm hoping you're going to join us. I'm reading this book, Salt, A World History. Look how thick this book is. This is how interesting that salt has been in the world. And this is what Jesus says that we are as his disciples. We are the salt of the earth. And salt is pretty stinking amazing. So I'm going to give this book away on Sunday to somebody. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, but I'm going to give it away so that you too can enjoy it. But I'm really looking forward to seeing you on Sunday as well. We do gather in person at 10:15 a.m. here in Portland, Michigan. We're right on the main strip. You can Google us, you'll find us, but we'd love to see you in person. If you're just kind of passing through the area, or if you're from around here, we'd love to see you. Join with us on Sunday at 10:15 a.m. You can also find us right where you're watching us now. So on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel, you can join us there as well. Love to see you back at both places, Sunday morning and Thursday night. I hope that you can make them both. It certainly makes my time better. And so I love it that you joined us tonight. Thanks for being with us. We love you. We'll see you soon. Take care. Good night.
Have a good night.